Are we up? Testing 1, 2. Nope, number 3, Christine. Testing 1, 2. How's the audio sound? A little loud? Well, bring it down a little bit. Are we good now? Hello, everybody. Good evening and welcome to the Arundel Camera Club hybrid meeting for Thursday, October 20th. My name is John Milliker. I'm the club president for the 2022-2023 season. The Arundel Camera Club was founded in 1957 and exists to promote the arts, science, and education in all aspects and fields of photography. For more information about us, please visit www.arundelcameraclub.org. We're excited to be finally meeting in person again, and I invite anyone watching us online that is located near or in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, to please visit us at the generous Severna Park Baptist Church, located at 506 Benfield Road, Severna Park, Maryland. We meet every Thursday except for the second Thursday? Second Thursday. The entire crowd is nodding their head. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Christine, would you like to come up and talk about our upcoming schedule?
Good evening. On October 22nd is our field trip. All right. Excuse me. To Cunningham State Park. On October 27th is our color and monochrome print still life contest. On November 3rd is a program by Jonathan Newton, who is a Washington Post photographer. Sorry, always happens right when I need to talk. And then on November 10th is our open digital contest.
Do we have any field trips coming up? We have a field trip this weekend.
This weekend on October 22nd.
Excellent. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, JC, for getting her a bottle of water. As we talked about, there is a field trip this Saturday to Cunningham Falls State Park. Make sure you check your email for information about that. Do we have any officer announcements? No? MPA announcements? You want to come up here, or you want me to pass the mic to you?
Just real quick, contest judging is coming up in about 2 weeks. I'll send everybody out the information about the program that you can watch live when they reveal the winners.
Oh, great. What Ron was saying should be a couple weeks, and he will send out an email for a link where I guess it'll be live or maybe pre-recorded, where you can check out the judging for that and revealing the winners. Do we have any new people visiting us for the first time? Well, I know we have Doug, but that's not the first time. Okay, Doug, come on up here and tell the club about you. They've heard a lot about you. Come on up. They've lost 2 contests because of you. So let's put a face with the name. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Doug.
Okay. Well, I'm Doug Wood. I've actually been part of the club for 3 years. I joined in September after the pandemic started as a digital online member. I guess there's a featured photography or profile out there that has all my background, but my grandfather got me into photography as a very small child. He had a darkroom in his basement and took me down and started teaching me, and I've dabbled since, and joining the club was the first time that I really had any kind of formal critique or serious, and I've learned quite a bit over the last 3 years from both seeing what other members are doing and listening to the judges' critiques.
Great. Thank you, Doug. We're so excited to have you with us. How long are you here with us for?
Just tonight, actually.
Okay. You drop off some prints for next week?
No, I'm passing back through here Saturday.
There you go. Well, good. I hope to see some prints from you. And remember, we have the print competition for the theme of still life next Thursday. Christine, I don't think we have any other business. Would you like to introduce our fantastic and very well-dressed speaker for tonight? I'm a big bow tie guy myself.
Tonight we have joining us Andrew. I'm sorry, my notes are on Andrew Hoff, who is doing a presentation on taking a different path, why I moved beyond landscape photography. He has over 30 years of experience, mostly centered on landscape and outdoor photography. And this is about his conversion to interacting more with people and their social interactions. So I'm going to turn the program over to Andrew.
How does Andrew want questions, Christine?
He would like we will be holding questions till the end. Feel free to ask online on the Facebook group, but we will be holding questions until the end.
Yes, sir.
Happy to be here. I was here, I think, about 5 years ago. I judged your print of the year competition, so I'm happy to be back. Let me say a few things. I've been photographing for a long time, obviously, and I started out, like most of us, just doing landscape photography. And it's fun, but it's easy, and I don't like doing things easy because only the light changes. The landscape's not moving unless you're photographing clouds and they're moving. But the only thing that changes is the light, and it generally changes slowly, not quickly. So I got involved with doing people photography, and particularly carnivals, fairs, regional things. So I'll tell you how I got involved with that and how it's kind of changed the way I photograph and how I think about photographing too. Okay? Ready to go. I started out as a landscape photographer, and I'll try to show you examples of some of the landscape work I did. And some of this is even back to my slide days. This stuff isn't necessarily even digital. So you just blow through those. So you can see most of landscape photography is pretty simple, very clean, very singular, not jumbled. When you're photographing people, that changes everything because everything's going on all over the place, and you don't know what's going on necessarily because you're looking through the viewfinder and you don't see things. So we'll talk about that. So I started dabbling in people photography, and this is kind of like how we got started. So this is my friend Karen Cummings. She's the one that got me into people photography, doing this series of work with carnivals. Next. This is one of the first images I actually took of people outside of the family. And I rarely photographed the family because I found it boring. And this is one of the first ones I took. This is in 2014, went up to New York City with the intent of photographing the city. And this is one of the first images I took. I've already started thinking about how I'm going to photograph, and this is an early one which you will see repeats itself in the people's photography. So what I did here was I opened up the child. I did not see the child's face when I took the photograph. Had I seen it, I probably would have moved a little more to the right, but this is what happens when you're photographing people, and I'll talk about it again. You don't see necessarily what's happening on the edges of the viewfinder. Because when I photograph, I'm looking at shape and shading of the light. So I'm kind of looking at it very fuzzy. I'm not looking at it in detail. So I lighten her face because her face is the most important one in this, to hold the corner. The fortune teller is in the middle. I made her face the darkest because she's the fortune teller. I want her to be mysterious and dark. And I opened up the person getting the reading from a little more. So I just want to have 3 different shades of skin coloration in there to keep your eye moving through the frame. So I spent too much time on this already. Next. This is the same time we were up there. This is not a planted photograph. I actually found it like this. Everybody thinks it's staged. It was not staged. Next. So the next year we went up in 2015. And I went up there, and the idea was we're going to shoot buildings, we're going to shoot the High Line, we're going to shoot this, we're going to shoot that. We get there, and we get in New York City, and the cloud level is about 10 stories. It is foggy, it is misting. And I look at my friend and goes, what are we going to do? Because the weather is horrible. He goes, I guess we'll have to shoot something else. So we get off the bus, we walk a couple blocks, and lo and behold, there are 2 parades going on opposite streets. So I said, I got to photograph people. I'm never comfortable photographing people, but I'm going to have to. So this is really how I started doing people photography. So this is Vietnamese parade. Next. This is the Albanian parade. I can tell you, Albanians are the craziest people in the world, especially when they're in New York City. This is the Albanian parade. Next. Still the Albanian. Again, I've lightened his face up because he's the most important face in there. Next. This photograph has gotten into a lot of regional shows and even national shows. What I did here was, again, I lightened up the most important face in there. I've darkened his face up because it's on the edge of the frame, and I want his face contrasting with that. But the thing I like is he is looking completely the opposite direction, not the opposite, perpendicular to everybody else in the photograph, which makes him interesting. Again, I shot it. I didn't really know what was going on. I did it, and I took all the spectral highlights out of all the windows and all the lights in the background because I wanted you to concentrate on his face. Next. Again, lucky light bouncing off the building. So next time we're up to New York City, we're up there in the winter, and I got some light bouncing off one of the buildings, took it, so now I'm starting to shoot people more and more. Next. This is my mother. And again, we talk about luck with photographing people. She is lit. I put a continuous light source underneath her pillow so you couldn't see it, just to give her a little bit of light. I took 3 frames, and that was it. Because I didn't want to intrude on my, she knew I was there. But the last frame had the queen on it. None of the other ones had. So there's that serendipity, how it sometimes works out. I moved nothing in that room. I left it as is. This has also gotten into Art of the State in Pennsylvania. Next. My buddy Jim up in Buffalo. I'm fond of him. His face has all sorts of character in it. Next. Person was in front of me, brought the camera up, shot it. Loved the photograph. So this is the early genesis of photographing people and how I started learning. Go on. So I start becoming more serious now. I'm seeing, yeah, I have potential because this is something I wasn't comfortable with doing. Now I'm starting to get a little more comfortable. So the early images I'm going to show you, and let's start seeing the seeds of the style of work I'm doing. Next. Again, lighten up the face. I'm starting to put people in these carnival situations in corners because I feel that when we see them in carnivals, we tend to move them away from us. So I start putting them in the corners. And a lot of the photographs are going to be very dark because I was thinking at the time next that my attitude on my personal life was getting very dark. So I'm thinking that maybe this had a lot of influence on it. Next. Oh, wait a second. Go back one. I'm sorry. Look how his body shape mimics the body shape of the stuff in his booth. That's what I find interesting. Next. Now I start looking for irony in photographs. Smiley face, turned over face, and her face is in the middle, and the sign behind her says winners. So I start looking for irony in these photographs. Next. Irony again. She's at a ride called Swingers, and she's in a wheelchair. Next. Again, I start now looking for body language. If you look, he is sitting virtually the same as the person in the child in the car. And then I have the little threesome behind her, which forms a nice little triangle back there. So he's actually forming a triangle, and she's forming a triangle too. Next. Again, Very lonesome look, very dejected look, very dark. Next. Body language again, you'll start seeing more and more of this crop up in the work. Next. Body language, lighten the youngest person's face up to bring you back. It's darker, lighter, and lighter yet to move you through the photograph. But again, it's body language. Next. I'll find a lot of work starts work with the hands. We don't know what's going on here. Is he mad at her? Is he telling her something? Is she mad at them? And I have a lot of expressions here which tell me a story that I don't know. It's a mystery. So a lot of the photographs with people end up being mystery photographs. Next. This is one I missed, and this is because of my camera equipment. I really wanted his face in the background to be sharp, the face in the foreground to be soft, because if you look, he's putting his hand out trying to get his attention, and he can't get it. And stuffed animals are always fun in there because I like to keep one eye open. Next. So that was the first year, and what happened was, let me talk about that first year. My friend Karen goes, hey, Nancy and I are going to the Berks County Carnival. Do you want to come with us? Berks County Fair. I went, I don't shoot that. He goes, why don't you come along anyway? I said, okay, because I think they want me to drive in reality. So, and it was at night, so I drove him up there, and I got the photos. I went, oh, okay, that was fun. I learned a little something. And so I said, well, let's try this again. So we went to 3 fairs the first year, all near the end of the season. So year 2 and year 3, I'm starting to find a little more identity in my work, and I'm learning a lot of hard lessons. So let's go to years 2 and 3. I'm now getting back into this very singular people and very dark look. But I love this leading in and that little bit up there in the top to hold that top corner. Next. You'll start seeing a lot of my images are people framed within the frame, which I find infinitely important. She is being framed. The person before is being framed by the door. Next. These people are being framed individually in their own booths. Next. So now you're starting to see this framing of people in the photographs, and I'm going to move them all, try to move them all in the corners. Next. And I really need this open here and these 2 white buckets to fill in that side. They're infinitely important in that. Next. Now, dejected, in the corner, hard print, but he's framed inside the window. Go. Again, you're starting to see this style I'm starting to pick up. Okay? Next. Framed and framed. I have to have that pig there, or this thing is not as impactful. It's still going to work, it's just not as impactful without that pig there. Again, I have him framed within the window, but I still have some space leading out. Now you start running that dichotomy. What do you want me to look? Do you want me to look at him or him? I lighten him up, make him the strongest part of it. Next. Again. Next. She is on the edge of the frame. She's looking at the edge of the frame. That's a no-no, but it's a yes-yes in this case, because I have all that text to fill up that whole side. And if you're going to have text in the photo, it better be sharp. I'll just tell you that right now. Next. Move the rough up in the corner. Next. I love people on their cell phones at these fairs. They make wonderful subjects. In the corner again. Next. Missed this one. Missed it by this much because she is not dead sharp. The sign behind her is sharp, but she's not dead sharp. But I really wanted was that cigarette in the back of her ear, because that tells me something about her. And the fact that she's looking away trying to wait for someone to come. There's nobody in her booth. She's got the cigarette in her. She's looking out of traffic, and I just missed it because she is not sharp. This was also a function of the camera equipment I had, which we will cover soon. Next. What do we see here? Hand, hand, hand. Very important because they all form a triangle. And I left, and you'll see a lot of my photographs, people in the foreground will be very dark because I'm using them to frame what is behind it. Next. What did I tell you about the eyes? Eyes in stuffed animals. Single eye there. Single eye in front of him. It's just this ironic picture of all the stuffed animals looking at him. I wish he was a fraction sharper. Next. Donkey. I got the triangle running. I've got the irony of the Mennonite and the Democratic Club and the donkey, because Mennonites use donkeys a lot for their fields. Next. This is one I want back so badly. He's sitting here eating a box of Cheez-Its. I've got that deadpan look on his face, and he is not sharp. What is sharp are all the stars behind him. Agitated me no end that I missed this shot. Next. I spent 15 minutes hoping this woman's mouth would line up with that bar so she had this gigantic frown, which is the irony in the photographs. Now, I know she's looking at me because I sat on the bench across from her for 15 minutes, and I was the only person there, and she didn't cooperate with me. I should have paid her off. Next. Too close to the edge of the frame. Simply put, too close to the edge of the frame. And I can tell you, these booths with these beer bottles are A, the noisiest ones, and B, they're the most difficult ones to photograph because that aluminum foil just throws off so much light. And the people in the carnies are in front of it, so it makes them darker. But he is off the frame too much, and I'm disappointed I missed that. So another lesson learned. Next. One of my favorite photos. Triangle going, the fact that he appears like the donkeys, and you got that beautiful dejected look on his face, he's overweight, it just sends a complete style to it that I've been looking for. Next. Notice the position of Han Solo in his face. They're virtually identical. That was the point of photographing him. I spent a lot of time working on this one because there's always people in front of him until the ride was filled. And then he would walk away from it. He also has that Elvis look on his face, too. But I spent a lot of time working on him, praying that I could get him in the right position, and I did. Next. Again, the look of dejection, the body language, and the person behind him, like this. Really need that. And I love the fact they got this big apple to fill up that whole hole over there. And I want him close to the frame because he's the most important person. Next. So sometimes the carnies don't work out. Sometimes they're half dead. So now I have to start thinking about photographing people. So I got this image. I really like this. This reminds me a lot of a Diane Arbus or a Sally Mann type photograph, where you had the family there, or even a Lee Freelander. Next. Again, pointing. The hand is out of focus. I know, I wish it was a tad sharper, but the most important part was I avoided the convergence of the person's head with the arm over them. And I have a triangle formed by the three heads. Now it's a youth, the youngest person's face is also the brightest. Next. Another missed opportunity. I get home, I realize that sign says Virginville above them. So I have three old codgers with the sign that says Virginville above them, and I was so PO'd about that because I missed it. All I had to do was bring the camera up a little, shoot a little wider, would have had it. So every time I went back to this fair in Kutztown to shoot somebody on, I was not getting the people I wanted. And again, it's a missed opportunity. But I wasn't looking at the edge of the frame. I wasn't familiar with the sign either. But now that I'm familiar with it, when I go back there, I try to find something that's going to work. But these three were, look, each one has a different personality on it. One's hands cupped, one's in the lap, one's on the thighs. It's perfect, except for I missed the sign. Next. I like to have people looking up, not to look at the bottom of their chins, but when they're looking up, they generally are a little more entertained. But it's nice to have 3 people looking up and 1 guy looking back. Next. I need the boy over here. There's just nothing, but again, I've got a triangle and I need him to hold that side down. It's one of those cases where I just saw something and I photographed it and I was really happy with it. Next. Is there a story with it? What are they talking about? I was sitting there fiddling with my camera and I saw these 2 girls there and I said, I'm going to sneak a picture in there. Now, to be truthful with you, I wiped out all the people in the middle, cloned them all out. Anything that was bright in the middle, I just cloned out to give a separation and have a void in there. Next. I'm not really happy with this photo because I think she's a little too close to the edge, and I don't think she's actually sharp enough. But again, still learning. Go on. Body language. And their 2 faces are almost identical with their glasses. But again, we're looking at body language. Elbows, everything bent. This is what I really like. Next. Irony. And I love the fact that the guy's grabbing his ear on the other side, so now I have body language in it. I've got the Trump thing with the big gun, and he's stuck up in the corner. Overweight, but I like the irony in it, so that's why I photographed it. Next. Again, on the edge of the frame, dejected. I'm picking up that style again. Next. Self-explanatory. Next. She is out of focus. I think she moved when I took it because everything around her is sharp and she just moved her head a fraction. That's something I can't control because it looks like their heads are still until you get in the computer and open it up and go, crap, not sharp. So another lesson learned. But we're going to remedy that situation yet. Go on. Really like this photo. Just that look on the face. And I have all those angles of everything sweeping up. Next. Back to the iPhones again, the cell phones. So there's a whole series of cell phone stuff. Go on. Let me just kind of blow through those. So again, now we have a solitary figure. Truth be told, they was talking to somebody over there. I took him out of this whole photograph because I want him looking into space, into nothingness. I will manipulate a lot of these photographs to make them work for how I want the whole gestalt to be. Next. Another one I really like, they're holding a conversation. They're completely different personalities and body shapes. Next. Kept someone in the foreground, made him black to frame the rest of it and give some depth to the photograph. Next. Another happy fellow. But again, I have him framed within the window. Next. Body position. Next. Another photo I would love to have back. He is not sharp. The knives are sharp. He is not sharp enough. I love the look on his face. I like the fact that the background's blurred, but he is not sharp enough. So I'm a little disappointed because this is one of the photos I was looking for. By the way, these knife pitching places are the best places short of the dunking booth to find people with emotion on their face. Next. Next. Okay, what did I tell you? I lighten the face of usually the youngest person in there. I lighten her face up because she's staring at him. He's staring back at me, but I like the juxtaposition and the tones of this. Next. I like this one a lot, and it's really because her face, she's looking back at me, but that face is bisected by that bar. And I kind of like the fact that she's kind of seeing me only with one eye. Next. Oh, I can tell. Look at the top. Look at the eyes of the stuffed animal up there. They look like they're lasering out. So that was pure chance I got that, because the fluorescent light is matching the eyes. But I can tell you, these guys that juggle the balls, every time you photograph them, that ball is never round. It's always elongated. So to eliminate that, I eliminated the ball and cloned it out. That's the only way to do it. Next. Again, body position, gesture. A very simple background too. Next. Another one of my favorite photographs. I've kept the hand with the coffee cup or whatever it is in the foreground to add depth to it. We'll talk about this one a little bit later. Next. Shoved in the corner. Body position. One leg under the other one. Next. Again, body position, the cigarette in the hand. Always looking for people with cigarettes in their hands or cell phones. He's looking over the top of his glasses. I have seen this guy for 5 years. I have more photographs of this gentleman than I have anybody else. But I think it's important to keep that cockeyed sign in it too. Next. There's a story behind this one. Oh, these actually go back about these last 5 images. Don't have to go back. The last 5 images were all shot at the Williamsburg Fair. I was starting to get a feel for it, and it was coming that night, and I was hitting almost everything on the money. So I'm on my way out. I'm photographing him, and I'm not real happy with it. I'm walking out, and I turn around, and I see this. I went, oh, that's what I've been looking for. So I did that. Again, lightened the face to contrast him with the background, took a lot of the spectral highlights that were in there out, opened up the flags on top so you could see them, so it wasn't just a ring around him. But you've always heard the expression, turn around and look behind you too when you're photographing. That's one of those times where it worked. Next. And this is probably my last image from Bloomsburg. I love this image. I've got someone with some character on their face. They're shoved in the bottom of the corner. I like the fact that these cups are going back into the frame. Next. And the last photograph from Bloomsburg, which has gotten into national shows and Art of the State, I never saw that person when I took it. Never saw him. I get home, go open it up, and went, where did they come from? Because I never saw that person. Again, I'm working with form and light. He was really dark, she was really light. She's a higher form than he is a higher position. I never saw the person in the middle. As soon as I saw a person in the middle, the first thing I did was lighten the face, because that is the most important face in that photograph. So I over-lightened it. I lightened him up, particularly in the tattoo, because the tattoo is more interesting than his face is. And I made her a little bit lighter too. So we have 3 different shades of light on here, because these two are on virtually the same plane. So one of them has to have a lighter face, and one has to have a darker face. Something's got to happen there, because if they're both the same complexion, then they get lost. And we'll talk about that on another photograph later. So really happy with that photograph. Next. Shit. COVID stops the whole project. So in 2020, everything on the fairs drops dead. And I just bought all new camera equipment, so I could photograph the fairs better, because my friend Karen's photographs are always sharp, always crisp. So next, this is what I did. Originally, I was shooting with the Canon 7D with a 17-55 zoom, or a little Sony original A6000, which was that little point-and-shoot type thing. Really nice, because I could shoot higher ISOs with the Sony. The Canon I couldn't. Canon I dared go over 800. So I used the Sony for the really dark stuff, used the Canon for not so dark stuff. But the problem with the Sony was the lens wasn't sharp enough. So At the end of 2019, I ditched almost all my Canon equipment and bought Fuji's. I got the Fuji X1 body for $999 when they're closing it out. Got an X2 body for $800 and picked up those two lenses. The 16 to 80-4.0 is the one I use almost all the time at the fairs because 80 is just long enough and 16 is definitely wide enough. I don't really want to carry a bigger lens because as soon as people see a camera, they get all excited. If they see this, they don't care. Even though this could be 24 megapixels and still get tight, they don't care about that. So I ended up making the conversion, and then COVID hit and all the fairs stopped. So I have all this equipment there and nothing to do with it. Next. So I want to talk about the work as a portfolio. And I'm literally going to read this to you. One of the signs of life is color. Most of the images are in black and white instead of color to show that what a lifeless drudgery these people do. The inherent life of working the carnival circuit away from the family, whether voluntarily or involuntary, is a conglomeration of tasks and duties. Setting up the booth, hawking the booth, replenishing the stock, particularly these balloon ones. They have to constantly blow up balloons. The boredom of very slow nights, which you will see. The eating when they can squeeze it in, dealing with all kinds of personalities of people, and after the bright lights are off, going back to share the RV with others, then the obligatory tearing down on Saturday nights or Sundays. These caretakers of the booth may feel tethered to their job as they watch the freedom of movement of the carnival goers as they enjoy their time at the carnival. So it's almost opposites. The dichotomy of those attending the fair and those working the fair tend to be opposites. This is an unhealthy lifestyle with few rewards for the carnival workers. Sometimes I feel that my photographs are akin to photographing animals in the zoo. So I've been now with I did get to 2 fairs in 2020. They were up in the hinterlands. No one really cared. I got to 15 fairs last year and 14 fairs this year. So this is a conglomeration of some of the newer work as of the food vendors and the carnies. So let's go through this. Again, I'm looking for gesture. Next. Go back to that frame inside a frame. Next. Back to the cell phones. Next. Again, I'm using people to frame up, but look, the photographs are sharper and clearer now than they were before. I've lost a lot of the grain. Because those Fujis, I can shoot a 3200 at f4 and they're sharp. Next. Again, now this is something I do and I'll talk about later. Look at the eyes. Look how white the eyeballs are. Because if anybody knows from photographing wildlife that the eyes are the most important part. In these cases, as far as I'm concerned, the eyes are a window to the soul. So I get the eyes white so you can see into them. Next. Next. Go on. 2 people spread out. We will see these people later. They're just as happy in the next time. Next year I photographed them. Again, look how white I made the face. It's the most important part of that. Next. A lot of times they're counting money. Oh, it's a blast watching them count money. They love counting their money. If there's nothing to do, they go back and start checking their money. Next. Next. Again, shove them in the corner of the frame, and I have them framed within the frame again. Next. This photograph I really like, and it's because of this down there. I have something that's curved and everything that is so predictable. And I love how it breaks the bottom up. Now, if I didn't have that in there, it would still be okay, but I like that wave in there to break the bottom up. Next. corner of the frame. Next. One of the few, in fact, probably the only decent photograph I have is somebody at one of those beer breaking bottle booths. And this guy was hauling the whole time. I was lucky I got one picture of him, and that was it. And I was there for 15, 20 minutes waiting to get one picture. Next. Cell phone. Next. Again, now we go back to gesture. Next. Gesture. Next. Now you get the idea. I don't have to tell you. Next. A lot of these booths post-COVID were now being run by younger people. And we also found out a lot of the booths post-COVID were also being run by families who are now bringing their kids to the booth, which we hadn't seen before COVID. And I just love this little bit just to pull you in a little farther. Next. A lot of times you're going to see in some of these photographs that there's a lot of action going on, and I've hidden the people within the action. This is one of these cases. Next. It can be boring. Okay, I've seen her a couple times, and her booth is in the same place every year. And 2 years ago, I got her just snoozing there. Next. Some people think this is staged. It is not staged. They just happen to be, this is very close to the end of the night. Next. Remember I told you about hiding people in a lot of chaos? I really like this picture. I just can't get her to pop out any more than that. I've tried my best. There's a lot of weight in it, and that's one of the problems. Next. Back to the knives. Happy woman. I got the kid on the corner, which helps. And, you know, it's just, those knife booths are fun. Next. She is not in focus. The knives are in focus, but I'm still happy with that because we know what she's doing, and I waited for her to get her face between the knives. Again, it's a lot of patience involved with this, and I'm not a patient person, generally, but I've learned to become more patient photographing people, and we'll get back into that too. Next. Next. There's a story behind this. That shirt really does say keep calm, but it had a whole bunch more text on it, and his sunglasses and keys hanging around his neck. So I took it all out and only left the words keep calm in it because it's ironic, he looks very, very calm in a booth that is very chaotic. So again, we're looking at irony. Next. A lot of irony here. Off the edge of the frame, things are moving around her, and there's nobody in her booth. Next. This is another thing I want to point out. A lot of times I photograph the fairs, I will go to the booth and go behind the booth and come around the other side. Because a lot of times I want to see the backs of the carnies and the faces of the people that are enjoying their booths. And a lot of times it doesn't work. But watch what happened when I went around to the other side. That's the one I got. And that's the one I really wanted. Again, he's now somewhat hidden in a whole pile of stuff. But that look, and you will see this guy later, I'll point him out. He aged 5 years in 1 year. Next. Nice pose. Nice light. Next. Irony. His big mouth is open. The lion's mouth is open. Again, sometimes you want to look for something a little different in the photograph. Next. So, I've talked about this before. Now we're going to go into a lot of images that have everybody about personalities and gestures. And this is really the heart of getting the photographs. If you get a carny or a person working a food window that has no personality, you're not going to get a good photo. And I'm talking about not just personality, I'm talking about the craggy faces, the look. So let's go look into that. Next. It was really cold that night. That's the first cold night we had in the end of September. It's a really cold night, and he was not a happy camper. Next. Oh, so happy to see me. There's a whole, I will show you more about this photo later. Next. Love this photo. Again, I opened up the eyes, I opened up the teeth. And I had to open up the end of the fingertip, I think, too. Next. At the edge of the frame. Next. Remember, photographing them with chaos around them, which I really like to do. But I love the gesture and the pose, and he has the darts in his hand, ready to go. Next. Back to the kids running the booths. That's such a dejected look on his face, like nobody's in my booth. How am I going to make any money tonight? Why am I out here? There's a whole story that we don't know with these people. Next. This was another one where I sat and sat and sat and sat and sat because there were either somebody at his booth or somebody walking in front of me. So I had to wait. I just sat down on the ground. I sat right next to a trash can, so I eventually became somewhat camouflaged in it. So he got tired of looking at me. And I finally got him for 1 second looking away with nobody in his booth. Next. I really wanted him to step one more to the right to put his head in that block. And it didn't happen. And this year when I saw him again running the same booth, this time the booth was on flat ground, so his head was above the boxes, so I couldn't redo the shot. This time when I photographed him, he was above the concrete or the asphalt, so you could get his head in the window. I don't know, maybe I should have waited a little longer, but he didn't look like he was really happy to see me, like a lot of people aren't. Next. Just a happy look. That look says it all. Next. This is the scariest guy I've ever seen at a carnival. And he's running a kid's booth. Look closely, he has a whole tattoo on the top of his head. He has tattoos up and down his arm. He has tattoos up and down his legs. He's wearing army boots. And he is the most dejected person I've ever seen working in a booth. And I was hoping he would be back again this year, and they changed vendors for the show, so he wasn't back. But that is the scariest guy. I have multiple pictures of him. This is the only one I'm showing. But again, we have all this chaos over here and him over there. Next. There's more about this picture, which I'll show you later. But there's a lot less than meets the eye in this. But I love her. I went to shoot her again this year. Could not get her in that position. She was always with somebody else in the booth. The booth was a little tighter than it was the other years. But I'm really happy with that picture. Next. You will see iterations of this type of photograph, which I've been trying to do and do and do. This is one of the better ones. Next. That's okay. But look at the gesture. It's raining. There's rain all over the place. And I've got him praying. I wish I could have shot him straight on, but I think if I go shoot him straight on, he's going to see me, and his look will change, his demeanor will change. Next. That's the one I'm looking for. It is very similar to a photograph by Bresson. And I worked really hard on getting the photograph because I stood there and stood there and stood there. And I shot it at the 80 millimeter, so I got as far away as I could and waited for the crowd to part enough to get her. And I got fortunate because her eyes were in a good place. So I've opened up her eyes. I opened up her eyes inside that sphere so you could see the eyes. Otherwise, you can't really see that eye in that sphere unless I go into Photoshop and clean it up. And I left 2 people on the side to frame her. So this has also gotten into national shows too. Next. I've seen this guy multiple times. Look, one eye behind him. But look at the look on his face. There's a story going on. He's talking to him. Look at the hands are not on the ground. Next. The happy couple have returned. There's such a mixture of emotion on this. So I lightened his face up instead of hers because he was further back, so I want to make him a little more prominent. Next. Originally, I did not like this photo, but then I started looking at it closer, and I've got the gesture, I've got the arm movement with the elbows bent, and I have the black top with the light colored skin. So I've got a color balance there. So I went back and redid it, and I'm liking it a lot more now. Next. Gesture. Next. Gesture. Here's my buddy, the basketball guy. Cigarette in his hand, whistle in his mouth. The wire rim frames. I love photographing this guy. Next. Look at the detail in this photo. He's got Marlboros there. He has 2 cell phones. He has his sodas and his chew there. And he's obviously overweight. And his booth looks horrible compared to the other ones. Next. Sometimes you get really, really lucky. I got really lucky with this. I did not, again, I told you, I see shape, I see light balance. And this is a case where I saw the shapes and the light balances. And I did not realize he was almost giving the illusion that he was staring at the stuffed animal. So when I went back, I opened up his eyes to make them clear. I also took the stuffed animal and opened up those eyes so it would be more obvious that he might have been looking at that. Next. Detail in the skin. I love it. And again, now do we have controversy because we have a monkey behind the black man. I've asked my very good friend at work who's black. She did not see that until I pointed it out. And then she said, now I can't unsee it. And I also took the background and knocked it down, blurred it as much as I could. I didn't want to blur it to the point where you couldn't see what it was. I never saw that when I photographed because what I'm doing is I'm seeing light, I'm seeing dark, I'm seeing round, I'm seeing round. It's all falling into place. I got a nice diagonal. Bang, I shot it. I get back and look on the computer and went, oh. But I love the photograph. Next. Same guy. Last year. This year, I should say. Again, the gesture and the puppy dog eyes, and they're both bending the same way. I love this photograph. Next. The face in the chaos. Look at all the stuffed animals are smiling. He's not. And he's giving me the hairy eyeball. And you look, again, I've opened up his eyes again and lightened up his face. I've left his arms dark, but I've opened up the eyes and lightened up his face. Because now you can see the whites in his eyes and you know he's staring at me. Next. I went to the lovely Maryland State Fair in Timonium, spent 2.5 hours getting in there. It started raining. The place was crowded beyond belief. That is the only good photo I got that whole night. A whole night's worth, and then 2 hours back home to get one photograph. But I will trade one good photograph, really strong one, for a whole wasted night. Because all I need are 10 good photographs a year from the carnivals. So I will accept that as a night's worth going out for. But look at his hand, the gesture in his hands. The 3 buckets, dark, light, dark. You know, it all falls into place. 3 sets of balls on the table. There's a lot of good stuff. And a single eye on 2 different stuffed animals. Next. He's sexy man. Now, I will confess that originally when I did this, it was cut off. So I filled in the whole left-hand edge. The problem was I can't duplicate the MasterCard and Visa symbols and make them fit on there. So I just took it out and just simply let the sign credit cards. But and the whole time I photographed him, the only time I saw his eyes open was when he was staring at somebody like this. Unfortunately, there were people in front of him, and I couldn't, it just didn't work. But almost the whole time his eyes were closed because there was nobody at his booth. And this is the Allentown Fair, and that place is busier than all get out, and no one stopped in his booth. So a lot of times people don't stop in people's booth when the people look bored or look creepy. So, next. So this is how I started looking at things differently, started photographing differently. Originally I would shoot frame, wait, frame, wait, frame. And I started looking back at the work, and a lot of times people's eyes were closed. So now I'm going in and going bang, 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 hoping that I get someone, their eyes aren't closed, and I get somebody blowing air out of their cheeks. If I go once, and then he does it, I've already missed it. It's too late. So I kind of changed the philosophy on how I'm doing it. I got to keep this in the bottom to hold the bottom in. Okay. Another one of the happiest vendors I've ever seen. But I love this photo. And the good thing is the right is moving behind him, so now it's out of focus, and it's because it's spinning, and now the focus is only on him. I love the shirt that doesn't fit right, the whole look. It's just, you get lucky. You do get lucky sometimes. Next. Another lucky shot. I don't know how long he was like that, but I happened to walk by and there he was. So I took him and I wiped out everything behind him. I can't wipe out the van, but I wiped out the table and the condiments behind him because they were distracting. Lighten up his face, lighten up the cards, lighten up everything in there I could, but left the background black so you can see his face against the black background. Next. This just got into he's got into Delaplane's national show last week. This is a photograph we'll talk about later. Look at the gesture. This reminds me of Diane Arbus. This is what I was looking for. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Next. So sometimes you have to photograph people at the carnivals because sometimes stuff's not happening. So I've now started working on a portfolio of the people that are attending the carnivals because sometimes they have a little more gesture and complexity than the carnies. And I get kind of bored shooting the carnies because some of them I don't know them personally, but I've photographed them a lot. So let's go through that. This was the only photo that happened. We had come up, Karen and I had come up the row, and when we came up the row, there were a bunch of people in the booth, so we didn't see them until we got past it. I turned around, and the kid with the stuffed animal was laying in the skee ball alley. I got one frame, and his dad goes, "Get out of the skee ball alley, there are people here now." Karen, who was about 2 steps behind me, went to raise her camera, and he got out. So again, sometimes you get lucky. And look at the bottom of his feet, are dirty. So I got really lucky there. I don't really like the light on him. But like I said, you get lucky sometimes. And that's, you got to be there to be lucky too. Next. Again, the baby, I lightened the photo of the baby because it was important, the most important part, because she's not doing anything. The baby has the emotion. And I wanted all that background chaos in the background. Next. What are they talking about? There's a story here. Body gesture. Leaning back, hands up over the head. Next. I love how the light fell on these people. Again, the youngest person there, I lighten the face the most. But if you look, all 3 faces have a different level of shading on them. Next. This is one of the few pictures I have of carnies actually interacting with children. And the kid in the middle has the ears closed because there's some loud noise. So I thought that was fun. And that, again, I don't like photographs. I will photograph children. It's not a preference. But if I find something interesting, I will photograph it. I don't go out of my way hunting for kids to photograph. Next. Like this one. This was at the dunking booth, which I talked about. He was intent on knocking that guy out. I got him in a position where he wasn't moving because it wasn't that well lit there. But I like the people in the background too. Really important photograph, and got great catch light in the eyes. Next. Not the same kid, believe it or not. Completely different place. But I like the way that everything fell into place with the lighting. Next. Oh. This was from one of 2 fairs I shot in 2020. Again, We got the hands, we got the gesture, got the look, the catch light in the eyes. Was not intending to photograph this. Saw them there, decided to zoom in on it, bang, there you go. Next. Gesture, kids nowadays. But I got to work on this one a little. I want to darken the lips a little bit to make them a little more prominent. Next. Next. Again, look how he's framed in the frame, like the previous one. Next. This is a photograph. I did not see that until I brought it up on the computer screen. This is why I like photographing these things, because I don't know what I'm going to get. Unlike landscape, when I say, oh, I know I'm going to get the fog's going to be moving, the water's going to be moving. This is why I don't see when I'm photographing, and this thrills me to death when I actually find it by accident. But I wish I could have been down a little lower, but you know what? I'll take this. I'm pretty happy with that. Next. Back to those knives again. Look at all the different looks on everybody's faces. Pointing, hands. Next. Enthusiasm. Next. Love the reflection in the sunglasses. If I don't have that, it's going to fall apart pretty quickly. But again, they got that hand at the edge of the frame. It's not in focus, and I don't care. Next. Back to those knife tossing again. Next. Next. Did not see the person in the background until I would love to get more and more on the top of the head, but I'm going to take that. Next. I have to go back and work on this. The hat says Vietnam on it. I want to bring out the hat a little more. But look at the different personalities we have in the back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 people, which is a nice odd number. And the 2 people in the foreground are the prominent people, but I still have detail in the background. Next. I got a triangle going with the people. Just a little bit different photograph. Next. Oh, another one of my favorite parts. There's a whole story behind this. We don't know if he's mad at her. We know he's going, God, just pick something, dear, please, please. Or if she's just reaching in, he goes, no, I don't want you to grab that. We don't know what's going on here. Again, this is pure luck that I got this photo. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, and the right person walked in. Next. Again, nice triangle of people. They're all looking up. Next. Again, pointing, and the thing I like is the kid in the background doesn't really care at all. Next. Looking up, but the youngest face in there is the brightest face to hold the whole bottom of that screen up. Because you don't see her until you bring your eyes down. And that fills in the picture. Next. Look at 3 different types of emotion on their faces. I don't care, get the ride over with, and get me off the ride. Next. Look at the top. I've got those 2 eyes in there, which makes the whole photo. Or helps make the whole photo, I should say. Again, now I've got different looks on people, people looking at other people, people not wanting to be seen. It's really important that I get something where all the faces don't look the same. Next. Another one of my favorite photos. Just caught that. And just, again, I don't ask them to pose for me, pure luck, and there's enough separation between his head and her head that they don't blend together. And that look in the eyes, oh, come on, Mom, you're killing me. Next. Just a lot of emotion here. And I love the fact that the shirt says, I'm not perfect, I'm original. But I'm original. I like that shirt happened to be on at the right time. Next. And again, 3 different types of emotion, 4 different levels of density on their faces. And I've wiped out every bright light in that background. And I can tell you, there are a lot of bright lights back there. Spotlights, lights on the Ferris wheel. I had to wipe them out so you could concentrate on them. And I made the mother's face the brightest because she has the most gesture in her face. Next. So, I'm working on another one, and this is called Space Invaders. Now, everybody remembers back in the 70s the game Space Invaders, but if I start having people I photograph don't like me photographing, so I'm invading their space. So that's why I call this portfolio Space Invader. So here we go. One of the few of someone actually acknowledging me back there. But again, frame in a frame. I've got two guys, two girls, one looking out, one other person not looking in, another person out, another person looking in. And I've got all that nice detail in the foreground. Next. Some people are actually happy to see me. Hard to believe. Next. Now, this is completely, really pixelated, but I like the look on it because it's very raw. These people are one of those punching bags where they see how fast they can punch it. I love to photograph them there, but they go so fast, they're so hard to get in focus. But I just like the rawness of this photograph compared to some of the other ones. Next. This is one of the first ones I took of the Space Invader series. I saw this guy carrying this stuffed animal, and a plastic inflatable animal, and he's giving me that look like, I don't want you to photographing me. I'm going to hide behind them sunglasses. Next. This is another one of the early ones. I like this photograph because A, the eyes are on the edge of the frame, they're looking back into the frame. And they're looking at me like, why are you taking my photo? Next. Love the detail on that, the whole outfit. Next. Look at the eyes. He's staring at me. He doesn't want me there. Next. There's a look of apprehension. And that's a little grainier, but I like it. Next. Back to those knives again. Next. Looking at me from behind the food booth. He sees me behind the food booth. Next. We'll talk about this one again. And look, I go back. Look at the gesture and the pose. And all the chaos around her, but I got her in a nice spot. Next. Saw that earlier, but I cropped it back because I think she's much more important than the guy, and I've got more of an interesting pose with her in gesture. Next. Whoops, caught me. But I wiped out everything in the foreground to only leave 2 cigarette butts on the floor to prove that she's been smoking out there longer. And this is the only photo where you can actually see the pack of cigarettes in her hand. Other photos I have of her, they're almost completely obliterated. So, next. And I shot that very raw, too. I did not want to soften that up. I wanted to shoot very raw. Next. Again. Cigarette break. Next. Love this photo. Love all the things going on about the pharaohs in the background, the ride, and his head is against something black, so his head stands out, and he gave me that look. This reminds me a lot of something taken from Northern Ireland during the IRA type stuff. If you look at some of the kids back then, they were obviously grainier pictures back then, but I get that look. Next. We've seen him before. He's still happy. And he's looking at me like, I want to go home. Next. We'll talk about this one a little bit later. Next. He's back again, but now see here, I've cropped him tighter than the original photo. So now he stands out. Next. This is a guy who's aged 5 years from the time before. And he gave me that really goofy look and that awkward body language like a Diane Arbus would. That's why I photographed. That's why I like this photograph. It's not picturesque, but it's raw. Next. I went to the Marysville Fair. I got 2 photographs from it. I was there for about 45 minutes. It was ungodly noisy. The people there are like they came right out of the mountains. There are meth heads there, there are overweight people there, and they're just rude people there. I got 2 photographs. This one and the one with the girl at the basketball hoop like this. And I was there for 45 minutes, and that was it. And oddly enough, that carnival, I've had some of the best stuff at. It's one of the strangest ones I've ever been to. But I'm really happy with this photo because I have a triangle going, and I'm getting that look. And of course, I'll lighten his face and opened up his eyes to make it more prominent. Bring him back out of the background. Next. This was taken the last fair I went to. I love that look. Next. He was trying to be funny. I took the picture anyway because I saw what he was doing. I went, that's going to be a throwaway. Then I came back and went, you know, that is so strange that I am going to use it. And I told my friends, and he says, I want you to take that whole background and tilt it more to make it even more bizarre. So I'm going to have to come back and do that. And he has his eyes closed. You know, I can't even open up his eyes. He did open up his teeth a little bit. And I might have darkened up the mustache. Next. Love this one. Just that look. And the last one, he was not happy to see me either. So, what do we have next? Now we're going to get in some details. So this is going to be pretty easy, but I'll show you what I'm doing. Because I know everybody wants to, I'm going to Photoshop this stuff, I'm going to fix it. Okay, we'll go into this now. Go. This is the original. I liked it, but I don't like it. I've got way too bright lights up there. I want to see him. I don't want to see everything else. So what we do, forward, we crop it all out. Now I have him in a better position. Now I've got a body here to frame it, and we don't know if he's looking at her now. Next. We just talked about this, all the chaos around her. It's just too wide for my taste. So what we do is we crop it. Straighten it and crop it. Now she's become more prominent. Next. Saw this before, but I don't like the top right area, so let's crop it back a little more. Next. And eliminate some of that stuff out there. Just put them in a slightly better position. Next. We saw this before. This is the original. There's a lot going on here. I have them at the edge of the frame, but I'm not real happy about it. So what we're going to do is we're going to crop it, and he's in a better position now. And it's a simpler photo. Next. This was the original. A lot of action up in the top, a lot of bright lights, a lot of body here, which I'm not real happy with. It's really dark underneath here, so what we're going to do, we're going to crop it and open up the legs a bit and open up the chair a little bit and still keep that one arm there, and took all that stuff out of the top that was bothering me and taking my eye. Anything that's really bright is going to take my eye away from what I wanted to see. Now he's becoming more prominent. Next. The original. Go on. More prominent. And go back one. This is something else to do. Look at all the glare on the balloons. I will take all the glare off all those balloons on the portrait photographs. Next. Again, this was the original. Way too much over here. I'm losing him. He's in here, but I'm losing him to this. And look at all the glare on the balloons. Next. Took it all off. That's a spectral highlight I don't want on because you're going to see that every time you look at the photograph. I want the background to be plain so you see the person in the photograph, not the background. Next. Look at all the glare on the balloons. It's really wide. Next. Took all the glare off. Opened up the cigarette boxes. Opened up everything in front of him. Next. I really thought this was the one. I didn't think this was my original. I don't know if I was happy with it. So what I did was go next one. I cropped it, and I'm not happy with it. So now we're going to go the other way. So go back. And I have the people holding hands here. I have some that fill up the foreground. I've got the big mouth over there. So I start getting a triangle going like this. And when I crop it, next, I lose all that. Now it becomes a more static photo. Next. Well, I thought that was I didn't think this was a 1-1. I want to crop that tighter. Next. Doesn't work. It's just too obvious and too much in my face. Next. I thought, oh, I want to focus on him, but now looking back, I went, you know, see, it doesn't work. Now looking back, I've got the sign that's coming down, I've got the hoops that are down, the booth looks like it's a mess, and he looks like he's a mess. Go for it. But when I go there, I don't get that feeling here. It's too it's just too static, essentially. Next. Again, that was the original, and then I cropped it, and again, now it's too static. I lose the background, I lose the scale, I lose the story behind it. Next. This is going to be a simple one. The most important thing is his face, and you see there's a lot of spectral highlights in it. So go forward, and I take out, I open up his face. You'll see the whites on the donkeys are gone, and I opened up the faces on the donkeys a little more too. So go back one. And took out the little thing. It's just the little things. You got to finish your photographs. Don't stop when you think it's done. Push it a little more. Okay, next. This got in a 5-stage show. This was the original. Look at all the spectral highlights on every one of those balls. All I see is white, and I see way too much. And I see the ping pong ball here. So go to the next one. That ping pong ball is gone now. I took all the spectral highlights off all those balls. So now the color comes out in it. And I crop the top, straighten it out, and it's a much stronger photograph. Next. Showed you before. Look at the difference between, I have all these spectral highlights here around him and the sign. And go to the next one. They're all gone. And I kept that one row of spectral highlights because I wanted it to go to him. I used that as a marker to prove this is what I want you to look at. Next. This was the original. Go to it. I wiped out everything behind her. Absolutely everything behind her because I want her to stand out. Go back to the original. And I also opened up all this around here and darkened everything else around her so you could see the light coming up at her feet. Took out the trash, cropped it on the left, go back, forward actually, and it's a lot stronger photo now. You got to really think about what you want to show. Next. Original, I got a lot of that head in the foreground, and look, you can't really see his eyes, you can't see the other animal's eyes, the pup stuffed animal, so go ahead and forward it. And I've taken all the highlights off the balloons, darkened all the balloons up. So he stands out and the other thing stands out from it. Next. This is the original. I was talking with my friend, he goes, you know what the problem with this photograph? He goes, there is no problem, but I need to make it better for you. Here's what I want you to do. Her face and her face look identical. They're on the same plane. You're going to have to make it so one of these two people or both of them stand out on their own. So go forward. I lightened her shirt, which made her face look darker. I did darken her face, but when I lighten her shirt, her face gets darker. I took out the bucket here, cleaned up the top, actually added space to the left side. And then I opened up her shoes because they're so unusual. So their complexions are not the same anymore. So they don't look like they're on the same level. Next. So you're going to say, well, why don't you photograph in color? Well, I'll tell you why. Because, well, I do photograph in color and I convert to black and white. But not all the time is the black and white the right answer, so I'll show you why. I can't get the skin tones quite right on her in black and white. So go to the next one. Bam, color. Skin tones work out. Look, it's got so much impact. Next. That looks pretty good in black and white, but let's go to color. More impactful. Next, and that's that irony again. Looks pretty nice in black and white, but watch what happens when we put it in color. So much more impact. Black and white's nice, but color just makes us jump. Next. But watch what happens when it goes to color. Now you really see the photograph instead of hiding it before. And I have to have that animal's eye. It's got to have the color in the inflatable animal. And to do that, I had to sit on the ground. I couldn't get, that was the show where I got the guy staring at the stuffed animal. And they only got 2 photos, and this was all the way down in Virginia. But I was having a horrible time trying to get photographs. And I wanted to do this, I couldn't get it. I said I had to just sit on the ground, almost lay on the ground to get the way I wanted it. And I had to wait for him to get there. Next. Oh, it's okay in black and white, but in color. Next. More impact. Next. Next. Now I see the red ring, and it's in her eye. So her eye is circled by that ring. Next. This one I really like until you put it in color, and take a look at this. Now I see the detail in the arms and the color, and that color runs right up to his face. Next. I've always liked this photo, just don't like it in black and white. Next. I got the red hair and the colors, and it just works so much better. Next. Irony, this will not work in black and white. It has no impact on black and white, so I didn't even bother to show black and white of it. Next. Again, no impact on black and white. And you had the irony of the Mennonites and the big smiling face. Next. This is the only decent picture I have of the dunking booth. But to get it, I had to make that really red and take the shadow and darken up the whole shadow because everything was very faint and all the detail, and including all these curved lines up here. I darkened all of them up to make it more prominent, to fill in that side so it is actually 2 photographs. Next. It will not work in black and white. Next. Will not work in black and white. So you do have to photograph in color because you will get good color photographs. Next. It does not work in black and white because the blue and the green work together. Next. This is my Nighthawks photo from Hopper. Just reminds me of that, and because of the yellows and the purples. Black and white, it falls apart. Next. I waited for the person to walk between those 2 people, and I wiped out the whole background, which was all full of lights. But I like the fact that I got that purple glow from the ride lights, and her hair was purplish, and I waited for that person to walk between them. Next. This is okay in black and white, but I kind of like the tones in it in the color version. Next. This will not work in black and white. I really like this photo. Again, the child's face, I lit up, lightened it up. Next. This will not work in black and white either. Again, on the edge of the frame, looking out, because we have the Old English being pushed to the edge of the frame by today's youth. That's a personal reason why I did that. Next. And this photograph is a very special photograph to me. I actually don't like I do like photographing people. I don't want people to know I photographed them, so to speak. So it was at the Hummelstown Fair. This was last year. And I'm walking. I usually walk clockwise and turn around and walk counterclockwise to see what's different going the other way, instead of keep going, lapping it like a NASCAR race. So I'm walking I walked by her, I went, oh, haven't seen that before in a long time. And I kept on going. I got like from here to like the parking lot and went, I should really photograph that. But that means I have to ask them. It means I have to find them. And that's not what I do. So I said, but no, I'm going to do it. I'm actually going to do it. So I started looking for him and could not find him. I spent 45 minutes looking for this person. It wasn't that crowded. It's a small footprint. And I finally found her, and I asked her dad. I said, do you mind if I photograph I thought it was a boy. Do you mind if I photograph him? He goes, well, you know, I don't know what the person's name was. Do you mind if he photographs you? And she goes, no. I said, okay, great. Stand here. So I had her stand there with the booth behind her, photographed it again, looked back at my camera, and there's somebody in a white shirt standing behind her, working the booth, bending over. I went, can you move over 2 feet to your right? She goes, okay. Moved 2 feet, snapped it, she was done. And that's the one I got. And this is the difference with the Fuji. I've got such detail in here I would never gotten with the Canon lenses. So when I went back and worked on the photograph, there are a couple of things I did. I made sure the red was redder. I don't know if she had a strawberry. I don't know if she was bruised. I don't know if it's a skin condition. I don't know if it's makeup. Well, we found out it's an anime character that she was imitating, like Comic-Con. And then I went back and darkened her lips so they become more prominent. But the most important thing was I looked at the photograph and I said, there's something missing. There's something missing in this photograph. I don't know what it is. Her eyes were brown, almost black. So when you looked, you saw nothing. It just disappeared. So I went back and changed her eye color. So now you can see into her eyes, which you couldn't see before. And the added thing is that little sloth right on her shoulder, which was not intended to be like that. So that's the story about that photo. It's a really special photo to me because A, I did something I don't normally do. Next. And the show's really not done because I'm going to continue doing this, but thank you for your time. Any questions?
Christine, I'm gonna leave
And then, yeah, you go to the next image then too.
Oh, can you go to the next image,
Yeah.
Christine? Double check my microphone as well, make sure I'm not too loud. Andrew, we have a question from the chat. Julie asks, it doesn't seem to be people attending the fair. What time of night were your photographs taken? And she noticed that seems to be no one in front of most of the vendors.
I try to show up about an hour before sunset to try to catch some light. It depends how far away it is. Like when I went down to Maryland Fair, by the time I got there, it was pitch dark. I prefer to be there about an hour before sunset, and I'll work from there. So my ISOs keep changing the whole way through the night. Okay. What was the other question?
That's the people.
Mm-hmm. So you say it seems like nobody's in front of most of the vendors.
Oh, because I wait till they get out of the way of the vendors. Yeah, I don't want them in there.
If anybody online has any questions, please submit them now. Anybody in the audience have any questions? Here you go, Bob.
Yes, I like that. Even with your black and white photos, you have a lot of them there. Do you generally shoot them all in color and then change them to black
Yes,
and white?
absolutely shoot them in color.
Andrew, can you repeat the question?
Oh, do you photograph in color or in black and white? Correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I definitely photograph in color and then convert to black and white. Now I can tell you, I am using, get ready for this, Photoshop 8 and Lightroom 3 on these. That's it.
Photoshop 8.
Photoshop 3. I've learned how to work with them very cleanly, so I'm so comfortable with them. I almost don't want to go up to the higher stuff because they're going to get lost right away. I would love to have content aware though, so I can fix some stuff.
Since you have problems with specular highlights, do you think about using a Polaroid filter?
No, because that's going to cut all my shutter times down, and my ISOs are going to have to be jacked up. The spectral highlights are nothing I can do about because they're just essentially lights and reflections off the metal. So there's not much I can do about that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one more. I see when you first started out, you were showing a lot of photos from New York, and now you switched over to carnivals and things. What was the big, what you see is, what, you see people are more receptive to your photographing them at carnival than they are on the streets, say in New York or Baltimore or something like that?
No, not necessarily.
Really?
The stuff I shot in New York, I could kind of hide. I kind of like to hide. Sometimes I'll take her and I'll hide behind her. I'll say, you stand here, I'm waiting for this person to move. And I stand behind her and then I'll just sneak out a little bit. bring the camera up.
That's the same problem I have. I'm just not comfortable yet just taking pictures of people. You know?
I have one of my good friends as a photographer is so comfortable with people, he shoots at probably 28 millimeters. He gets that close to people. And he makes no bones about it. He doesn't care. He says, that's where I'm going to photograph from. That's where they're going to have to get used to me. I don't want to be so obvious that they see me and they change their demeanor. I've seen people look at me. We saw this at York Fair. A person saw me. It was 7 o'clock at night, right on Saturday night. He turned off his ride and walked away because he did not want me photographing. Now, he didn't say he didn't want me photographing, but I knew he didn't want me photographing him. And we actually thought he was going to go to security to get me called on. And I had other guys, they'll see me and they'll just go like this. Oh, why? Yeah, we'll get to that one. And there was another person I did ask who was very jumpy. He was working food window, and I said, but he had a lot of texture in his skin and a lot of character. I said, can I photograph you? And he goes, I prefer if you didn't. I said, fair enough, and walked away. If they come up to me and say, please don't photograph me, I'll accept that. Because once I start trying to do that, then I have ruined it for all the other photographers. And he's not going to give me the look I want. Now, I know someone's going to ask the question, has anybody ever complained about you photographing them? And I'll give you a short story. You saw the photographs where I had the people in their faces in the ticket booth. And I was at the York Fair this year, and my goal was to photograph someone like that. But every time I stood at the ticket booth, the line was always too long. And the one person stood up, so the window was here, which wasn't going to me a good. And the other time, the person was moving their head, and there's somebody in front of them, so I couldn't get it. I kept walking around. Every time I come by there, I go look for it again, look for it again. So I was leaving. There was probably about a half an hour left in the fair. I'm leaving. I get to one ticket booth, the last one they had before I walk out, and there's one family in front of us, I think 4 people. It was like 2 mothers and 2 kids. And I go and set myself up. I'm like from about here to John away from them, if that far. And I'm setting it up, waiting. And the person behind me goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm photographing people. Do you have their permission? I said, don't need their permission. They're in the public, I'm allowed to photograph them. You need to ask for permission first. I said, no, I don't have to ask for permission. Why are you photographing them? Well, I do fine art photography, and I do it on a regional and national level, and I do exhibitions of it. What does that mean? I went, I can see we're going south now real fast with these people. I said, I kind of said, I don't have to explain that to you. She goes, I think it's very rude that you're photographing these people. I said, I don't care. I said, if someone's, and she goes, you shouldn't be photographing women and children. And I went, okay, now I see where we're going with this. And I didn't say, hey, I can photograph men, but I can't photograph women and children. So I said to her, I said, I'll tell you what, someone's photographing kids on the carousel with their iPhone, and they're taking pictures. Do you think they ask permission of every person in there? When the press comes in, do you think they're asking permission of every person they take an image of? Well, that's different. I said, no, it's not different. I said, there are video cameras here. They're always taking pictures of you. I think you're rude. I think you should ask her permission. So she walks up to people and tells them, he's taking your photograph. He's taking your photograph. I went, oh, here we go. And oddly enough, the person that was complaining was the person that does caricatures of people, sketches of them. And I really was tempted, because I know it's sort of going over her head, tempted to say to her, by the way, do you ever ask permission to draw these people? Because I know you're getting tacit permission by them paying you, but have you ever said to them, do I actually have your permission to draw you? And if someone's taking a picture of you drawing them, do you tell the person that's taking the picture to put the phone away because you're going to be in it? So eventually she goes, you know what? I don't want you in my booth, which I really wasn't in her booth. I said, okay, this is getting ridiculous. I'm getting really annoyed And when I get annoyed, then there'll be problems photographing because they'll take me out of my mindset. I say, okay, I'm out of here. And then we just walked out. So that's the story of that. It's the only person in 4 or 5 years that's ever bothered me about it. And she was like 26 years old. And you know, I don't have to talk into that. So next question.
What kind of camera do you use and what settings do you use?
Fuji?
He doesn't have the microphone.
Oh.
What kind of camera do you use and what settings do you use?
I now use a Fuji X-H1, predominantly in a 16-88mm lens because I get 6 stops of image stabilization with it. So I can shoot at 3200 at f4 at about 125 on these dark situations. I've got to have that stuff. I've got to have that image stabilization because otherwise I'm going to have to shoot at f4 at a 30th of a second. And that's when you get hand blurs and head blurs. And you don't get to stop the action. You don't get, it's not sharp enough. It's got to be sharp. And I don't mean so sharp that you can cut glass with it. It's got to be sharper than the other stuff.
Okay, Susan?
I'm a novice photographer. I've been in the club since 2015. And I still think in terms of what would the judge say when I'm setting up a picture through the viewfinder. In looking at those very busy backgrounds of the carnival booths and the half of a person in the picture, my mind goes to, the judge would throw that out
I
or
know.
say you shouldn't crop it.
I know exactly.
Your collection tells a very different story,
Yeah.
and it told us some great information, but how do you get past that worry?
There are a couple things you have to think. A lot of these photos don't stand well alone. They stand as a series. I was up at a portfolio review at Woodstock, New York, and someone showed these pictures of her or him, and their faces were all blurred like they were yelling. I went, like, garbage. And then they spread the whole thing out, and then it made sense. A lot of times, it's the body of work makes more sense than the individual photo. But it also depends on your judge. If your judge is forward-thinking, they may accept it as breaking the rules and being risky. So sometimes you got to play the judge, and sometimes you lose, and sometimes you win. It all depends on what the judge. It could be a judge could have had a bad day when they came in. I've seen that happen from getting judges for our club for years. One of our best judges came in and judged horribly because he was exhausted. And he judged quickly and horribly. And I was appalled because he's usually a really good judge. And he just had an off night. So, you know, it tends to work better as a series, number one, unless you have a standout photograph, like the woman in the ticket booth with, you know, the thing. That's when it works best, but it also works well as a series. So if you have a competition like, we want you to show essentially a portfolio type competition, which I've tried to push in our club to make people work on a body of work for a whole year. Then it works. But individually, sometimes it just don't stand well alone. And that's a risk you take. So, you know, if you have a lot of faith in the photograph, put it out there. Don't give up on it. And then explain to them, this is why I showed it. This is why I photographed. This is why I think it's an important photograph. He may not agree with you, but you have to have conviction that this is a photograph you wanted to show because you have faith in it. Okay?
Christine, do we have any other questions online? It's kind of funny with competition images. You either make a competition image or you make an image that's going to sell and make you some money, it kind of seems like, on my end. Andrew, I have a really quick question that's probably going to take a lot of explaining. My first part is, are you ever using a tripod?
Never.
Okay. My second part is, how are you dressing and how are you presenting yourself to try to disarm people that may have an issue?
I do not wear shorts, first of all. I do not wear a hat. I usually dress in dark clothing and my jeans, and that's it.
So you're trying to hide almost?
I'm not trying to be obvious.
Okay.
It's a very simple outfit. You know, if I wear shorts, then you're going to see my legs. I don't wear anything flashy, let's put it that way. I'm not trying to say, hey, I'm a photographer. I'm just trying to kind of blend in with everybody else there. I said I don't wear a hat because I can't stand to photograph with a hat on, first of all, period. But I just don't try to make myself obvious.
Have you ever tried maybe kind of looking like a photojournalist, or do you think that's going to keep people from doing their natural?
That is a problem because I've always said, are you working for the paper? Can you take my photo? Are you working for the press? Can you take my photo? I hear that all the time. So no, I'm photographing for myself. And they look at me like I'm from Mars. You are with the press? No. Well, why are you photographing? Because I like doing it. So that's why I kind of dress down. I mean, I could put the photo vest on and all that stuff that says, hey, there's a photographer. That's kind of why I like the black camera. I wish that one lens wasn't as big as it is, but that's what I'm stuck with. So.
Gotcha. Any other questions before we end the meeting?
What does R stand for?
Richard.
So you don't like Richard?
No, my father's name is Richard. My father has the same initials as I have. He goes by Dick. So I dropped the Richard and went to R. Andrews so I can differentiate myself from him.
Well, since we're going there, how are you so special that you have an extra number and a letter in your cell phone number?
C.
Take out the 2 and the C in the last section.
Okay, anybody online that may want to reach out to Andrew? What is the last four? The last four is 1564. Okay.
Spell check didn't catch that.
I'm going to come up. Last chance for any questions. Did we get any questions online, Christine?
Where do you even get a C from in there? That's not even capitalized.
Thank you all.
That's what it might have been.
Thank you, Andrew, so much for coming
no
out
problem.
and
Thanks for
entertaining
having
us.
me.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us in person and virtual. Don't forget this Saturday is the field trip to Cunningham State Park. And then next week is our print competition. Get your still lifes printed. And Ron, did you send an email out talking about the judge? I think you did, right? Just a reminder, we usually don't do this, but we have the same judge from last time. So the smart people in our group are going to go back to the comments that judge made on your images last time, make those changes, and send those prints out and get them in. And we're going to be here next week for print competition. Thank you all so much. Hopefully Christine's ready to send us out.
And if anybody wants to talk to me after this, I'll be here till we need.
Perfect. Send us, take us out, Christine. The one that says end. You may need to scroll down.